Hello, welcome back to the shop. Today we have an exciting one, kind of a follow-up in a regard to one of our previous videos. We have the actual Milwaukee Bandfile. Pretty excited about this. Let's get this thing open and check it out. Okay, so before we dive into this a little bit too much, let's take a look at some of the marketing wank that they got going on here. Fastest spot weld removal, unmatched control, and great mobility and access. So I mean, those are all good things there. Let's see what else they have to say here. They're reiterating their front things with some graphics here. Some time durations. The control part I'll be very curious about, and also some of this other stuff here. We'll see how all that works. They're saying that it's, you know, brushless motor, all that fun stuff, and all the stuff we expect to see from Milwaukee. So let's toss that aside. Take a look at what we get here for sandpaper. Get some nice paper there, and what we really want to see is this thing. First impressions, it feels nice and solid, and okay, so you can take that right off if we want to, and so this lever is how you adjust what angle you want, which is kind of nice. It's nice and quick, and you can take the whole thing right off. And then here's your drive wheel, and it looks like they may have a little bit of a groove in there to maybe assist in traction, but really with these you don't need a ton of traction. It's not that super critical. So let's just lock that in an arbitrary spot. Now let's see here. This should push in and lock, which it does, and then once you get your paper on, you expand it out. So in order to put your paper on, looks like they have basically a hook here that you just get on your fastener like that. You can swing that out of the way, and let's get this compressed. I'm gonna have to do that off screen. There we go, we're compressed. And now let's get our paper on there. Now, I'm not really closely paying attention to the direction of this paper. I don't see an arrow on it. So the heck with it, we'll just put it on. Let's see what we get. So putting it on isn't bad at all. Just got to get it below that flange. And you may have to stretch it a little bit here. That's good, actually. And close this up. And then we should just have to push our button. That'll stretch that out. And let's get a battery on this thing. Just like that. Light comes on, it comes to life. And let's see what we got here. We got mode 1, mode 2, and then if you hold it long, you get forward and reverse. So probably 2 different speeds and forward and reverse. So let's see what we got here. Okay. So if you notice, I don't know if you can see which way it's turning, but it actually does tell you forward is that way, reverse is that way, and I'll probably mostly run it in reverse. No, forward. I think it was right the first time, reverse, because it chucks the dirt away from you. If you run it in forward, all the dirt's going to fly back towards you. So anyway, let's see here. She has some pretty good speed to her. and there's your other speed. So we could get out the old RPM tester here and see what speed we get if I can get the stuff to stick. Now, some of you may remember we kind of made up our own Bandfile a while back using a kit from eBay, and that got us a nice 3/8 Bandfile, which, as evident by all the dirt on it, has been very handy here in the shop. So I figured we'd get the 1/2-inch version and see how that holds up. So let's do some comparing here. This is an adaptation and ultimately a compromise, and this was purposely designed for this. So I think what we'll do, keeping in mind that this is 3/8 and has less width and everything else, we'll just see what kind of finish we can get with some of these, and I'll see if I can work out a good way to check the RPM and all that fun jazz. Okay, like any good self-respecting shop, we got all kinds of scrap metal laying around and pieces and parts for things that are hacked up. So here's just a cut-off piece of metal that we did a test with for another tool. Maybe you'll see that sometime. And it's got these nice lips here. I figure we could kind of get an idea on the difference between the two here of removing the material. And I also want to see if we shred this belt, if we get a little too aggressive. That only speaks to the belt, not the tool, obviously, but all the same, it might be interesting. We can try and do a little surface cleanup here. Maybe we'll do 3/8 on this side and the other one here. So let's start with the original one here that we had made up and see what we can do. So you can see we're removing material, but we're not doing it all that fast. Now, keep in mind, this tool is on-off. There's no variable speed, so that's going to be something that's going to play a role as we get into comparing these. Again, this is a compromise. This is the cutoff tool that we put a homemade kit on, and it's been really super handy here in the shop. But let's keep going with this and see if we can get this flat. So we're getting that close. I don't want to overheat this or anything, but you can see running in reverse, you can see all the dirt getting chucked out that way, away from you working with it, which is a positive. So that's getting close. We weren't just augering away at that, though. It took a little bit of work. Let's flip this over and see if we can clean up this finish. So there you go. If I can get it in the right light, a little bit more could be done there, but that's getting that classic Bandfile finish that everybody loves. We could also take the corners off here. We could also take these corners off here. Real quick, which is why it's called Bandfile. Basically squeeze the trigger and have at it. Just like that. And you can see that cleaned up pretty good. So that's just a quick experiment with our 3/8. Now we got the same burrs and everything at this side and about the same height of material here. Let's start on 1 with this tool and let's see what we get. Now, this is a 1/2 inch, more surface area, and it may be turning faster even at 1, so I'm pretty curious to see what we get. So you can see that's not, I mean, it's about the same speed going as the other one. So let's shift to 2 here and see how much of a difference that makes. So it's definitely faster, and you can hear the variable speed. You get to the end there and you get a jump, so it's not like an infinite variable speed, but it is pretty good. So here you can see we were able to get that lip off, and this is definitely putting more heat in the workpiece, so I can tell it's removing more material. Now let's see if we can clean up the surface rust here and also take those burrs off. So that, as you can see, was much quicker than the 3/8 to take care of that stuff. Let's hit some of these burrs. So that's pretty quick. You can see everything was much faster, which makes sense. I mean, we're running a bigger belt, and we're running higher speed. So I think for removing a fair amount of material, this is definitely gonna do it quicker. And I think with the slower speed and everything, you're gonna get a bit of finesse. So let's see what we can do here on 1. And see if we can take some more of this simulated fillet weld out. This is, you know, a little bit of metal sticking up that would, you know, emulate a weld. So right off the bat, going back to 1, I can definitely tell it's nowhere near as effective as far as removing a lot of material, but if you were looking to clean up stuff, I think that would be pretty good. Let's see what it does on 1 on just this surface rust. So basic sanding and cleaning off stuff, I think 1 is very effective. You can't really tell much of a difference between any of these surfaces now. You have the 3/8 there, we have high speed, second speed here, and first speed here. They're all pretty good and equal. So let's keep going here. We'll go back to 2, and let's hit some of this other little bit higher area. Let's see what it does. So I loaded it a little bit more there. You could hear it, and you can also see I'm starting to get a dish in this right here. I was trying to purposely do that to see how it works under load, and it's behaving much better under load than the 3/8 was. So let's continue here with a little bit. Let's do some right here and see if we can get all this flush. And I'm going to push down on this a little bit more, and we'll see if we can either get the belt to kick off or maybe even break. We'll see what we can do, but you'll hear the motor load up. So I actually pushed pretty hard on that. You could hear it. It was probably more than you'd really want to do, but that actually removed material pretty quick, and we are still on 2. Let's go down to 1 and push down on it pretty hard and see what we get. So it definitely slows down with 1. I was curious to see if it was going to try and throttle up and maintain, but it did still remove material. I was not getting the belt to slip, so the spring tension on here is pretty good. That is something that we would occasionally get with this. Depending on what we were doing, we would get a little bit of belt slip now and then, but this is a Harbor Freight Bandfile attachment, so the expectation shouldn't be quite as high there. So this does seem to be a pretty good Bandfile attachment. So there we go. You can see just working that across there, you can definitely remove material without too much issue. I was laying on it different amounts. You'll probably hopefully hear the different laboring of the motor, but instead of getting this to slip, I was actually drawing down the speed of the motor. So that's speaking to a very good a level of traction for the belt here, or the belt. It's so that's really good. So I don't think you're going to have slippage issues with this, which is a good thing. So I guess the question is, how does this stack up to... I'm not going to be able to show air, but I think we can compare this to something a little bit more old school. Okay, so here we go. We have an old Milwaukee Bandfile here. She's a 120 volt version. Had this thing quite some time. And we'll probably notice a few differences here, but the belt is the same size here. So this is more of an apples to apples comparison. Now this is not pneumatic, it is electric, and this is utilizing basically an angle grinder motor, and we'll see what results we get. Now, something to keep in mind, these things don't require a ton of power because you can't get a ton of exertion down just because of what's going to happen to the belt. You're going to break the belt at some point. So this amount of motor in reality is probably a bit overkill, but it was something they had. They made lots of them and they were able to adjust for it. So what we'll do here is we'll try and finish cleaning up our 3/8 side, and we'll see how it goes with this thing. So first thing off the bat, you probably can't tell with the camera, but this is quite a bit louder than the new file. So this is a used belt, and you're seeing pieces of it fly off here and there. I am trying to push down on this, and it's not stalling the motor. As we said, this is a lot of overkill. But I did forget that this thing actually runs what they would call the forward direction, which chucks the dirt back into this thing. As you can see, a whole bunch fell out. That is, for me, I actually don't like running these this direction. But anyway, let's keep going here. So there we go, that caught on me, and that was the belt starting to go. Not really a surprise. Like I said, this was a previously used belt, but you do get the idea. I would say using these, this is more effective than this, but this is more effective than both of them. I think this is probably the most effective version. As you can see, I was able to clean up where we were kind of hovering around with this. Granted, this was older paper and all that stuff, but this, I could tell, it's more cumbersome. You know, you're flopping around more with it and everything. This is a much more ergonomic and convenient tool to hold. So overall, I'd say this is a win. I think it's a good tool. We shined up some metal with these. I don't really see anything that I have a concern with. There is a safety here, which isn't too bad to work with. And you can see there's also a trigger lock, surprisingly. So it'll continue to stay running, which is actually something this old thing doesn't have. It's actually just a momentary. And the adapted cutoff tool, for obvious reasons, does not have a lock on it either. So it's just trigger control. This has a specific feel to it, and so does this. Neither of them are bad to use. This one, if you're used to the air tool type designs, I think that's what they're going for here, and I think they achieved that pretty well, just like they did with their ratchets and everything else. Okay, so why not? Let's put the other belt that came with the new one on this, and we'll compare. Now, one thing to take note, these older ones, they don't have a latching mechanism, so what you got to do is you have to pull this in, and you have to hold it like this and get this belt outside of your wheel, and then you can let go, get your twists out, and that should be that. Now this does have knurling on it here, and your guard just flies off into oblivion in the shop. Give me a second. And your guard just goes on here, snaps on, and you just give it a hit, and it'll line up. And let's give this a try one more time here and see how it does. Now, something to keep in mind as you're using this tool, now I'm holding everything, but sometimes you use a Bandfile holding it. Have your gloves on, have your safety glasses on. I'm holding the tool all the way back here in this instance, and this tool you can hold much further front as with this one. So you have much more control, you're in the balance line of the tool. It doesn't feel like you're fighting anything. Whereas this one you have a whole lot hanging out, so that's another thing to compare if you're talking old 120s. So believe it or not, this actually feels, and you can see, maybe it's because the pads are worn off of this, but this one actually feels like you can't get things as straight because, well, let's stick that on there. That's basically what's happening as you push onto here. Whereas this new Milwaukee one, you'll see there's a piece of metal right there that keeps everything straight. So we can push down. We can push down basically anywhere along there, and this will stay flat. So that's a pretty big difference also. Now, to be fair, the Harbor Freight one has that piece of metal in here as well. So that one, so there I was able to make the belt slip, just showing you that. But here you can also try and make sure you stay relatively flat. Something else I'd like to point out here is they have this little flapper deal here to kind of help push the any dirt coming when you run this thing forward off, and that's pretty good. That works effectively. I still like running them the other direction so that everything flies away from me, and it doesn't get all over my workpiece as well. And you look at these others, the Harbor Freight one does not have that. You take a bath when you run that one, and this one actually kind of does. It's all enclosed here in this guard, so that kind of helps catch everything as well. And you know, as we saw, there's your classic Bandfile finish. Overall, this one, you know, you have that little loose area here without the flat that you can use to kind of get yourself on corners, and you have a nice long area here that's flat. Let's just do a quick comparison. Much longer work area on this one than this old electric one, and obviously it's a longer work area than the 3/8. Okay, so it appears as though these lights will stay on for a half hour if you leave it in reverse mode, so that should answer that. Now, another thing I should probably cover is the adjustment of this. Say you put your belt on and it chucks the belt. So most Bandfiles, any good ones anyway, you should be able to adjust your belt. Now, it's easy to show on this one. So I'll run this and I'll turn this knob, and we should see this belt move back and forth as the center changes. So here we go. So you want to run your belt in the center of the drive wheel there. Well, this isn't the drive wheel, it's the idler wheel. And this is no exception to that. And the way you adjust that on this is you loosen this set screw, this Allen set screw, and then you can adjust this Phillips screw, and that will move where your belt's at. Now you'll want to run this, freewheel it, and let it just find its spot, make any adjustments, and then, you know, readjust. Now this one appears to be running a little bit off center, so maybe we can try and adjust this. Okay, so to adjust this, all we're going to do is you're going to need the 1.5 out of your metric Allen wrenches, and you're going to want to loosen this set screw. Okay, and then you're going to want to take number 2 Phillips, that's preferably not furry like that one, and then you're going to just turn this, and little adjustments make a big difference. So I can already tell it's moving, so we'll make an adjustment, and we'll need to go the other way. I just saw the belt drop. Tighten that up. So now we have, should be able to see, an equal amount of belt on both sides of that idler wheel. So now we can take our set screw and tighten that back up as our lighting dies here. And there we go. We've tightened that up. Test run it, and everything looks good. So we've centered that up. That's a good adjustment, and that should be good. Now, one thing to say about this better belt tension and the way this is held in here, I don't think we're going to shred up belts as much. It's always been part of the problem with these older ones, is they're always a little janky, and even this Harbor Freight one, the tension isn't as good. It's better, but it allows the belts to move around, and I think that contributes to the belts failing prematurely. So it'll be interesting to see how that works, if that's actually true. But I think keeping everything centered good and having good tension on this thing is going to make a big difference. Now, running all of these, I would say if you're looking to remove a lot of metal, and here's another view where you can kind of see, look at how much gap this thing has. I don't know if this is just how this one is, or if it's just how these are. Here, you don't have much gap at all. You get into that piece of guard metal, and you have the same thing here, piece of guard metal. But we're able to remove the most amount of material with this one, without a question. And I'd say this one here you probably have more torque with, but as you can see, you kind of lose control of your belt. You're not able to be as flat. This one I believe you have the most finesse with. Now Milwaukee does make a 3/8 version of this, same tool, different head. It's probably going to be very much akin to this, but it probably won't slip as much. I think that has something to do with this drive wheel, as well as the spring tension. This does not have anywhere near as much spring tension as this, just compressing it. This does have a good amount of spring tension, but it's not able to keep everything as flat. So, something to think about between them. Here's 3 versions of Milwaukee Bandfiles, and I'd say the new one, I think it's probably up to all the hype. So we're moving on to the slideshow section of our video, and the question really is, how different are all of these different versions of the Bandfile? So we'll take a look at the old one first, the old school one, and you can see with the Bandfile that the belt, you can see a lot of space all the way around it, even at the top where the guard still remains on the tool. That belt's nowhere near there. It's like, you know, stretched out beyond it, and that's just how these old ones were. as we take a look a little further at it, you can see that the adhesive is kind of worn through on it, and the belt, it really has a lot of deflection on it. It's pretty hard to get things straight with this thing. That can be good if you're working on round stuff, but it's still not the best depending on what you're working with. So looking at the 3/8 Harbor Freight, you can see they tried to put some metal in there to keep everything straight, but it's at an angle and it has a little bit of a gap in it, and it appears to be bowed. I don't know if that's from use or how it was from factory, but they're making an attempt, and it is easier to get a flat work surface with this tool. But as we look at the new Milwaukee 1/2" Bandfile, this is like dead straight, and you can see that the belt has very nice even tension on it, and it's not really taken into any strange angles or anything like that. They tried to keep it as straight as they could, keep everything, sleek, which is nice. Another look at all three of the Bandfiles. You can just kind of see how everything has changed over time between the original one, which is an adapted angle grinder attachment, and that, served its purpose for a long time, but they are an angle grinder attachment, basically. Is really all they were at one time. So they're kind of clunky, noisy. The 120 volt motors were very loud, and it's not the easiest thing to hang on to. Then we have our version of the Bandfile, which is an adapted 3/8 tool, and it worked out well for us. I didn't put the 1/2" on it. I just went with the cutoff tool, went with the 3/8 because I didn't want to overpower the traction on it. I knew that the spring tension was going to be kind of lacking, and the drive wheel, I wasn't sure what to think of it all, so we went with the 3/8, and we've had quite a decent amount of success with it. As we look at the new 1/2" tool that Milwaukee came out with, we can see it's just a little bit more sleek and compact, and that's evident as we look at it next to the 3/8 Bandfile that we adapted here in our own shop. It's the new 1/2" is much thinner and much more compact than even the compact cutoff tool that Milwaukee made. So you look at the motor profile, you can see that even the Bandfile is narrower than the cutoff tool's profile, and that it really does have a much sleeker line to it. The air ports are a little bit different. I don't think you're going to get air blowing in your face. You don't really with either of them, but you're not likely to get it with the new 1/2" Bandfile. As we continue to look at the tool, we can see that it takes the M12 batteries, and they fit very nicely. It'll run on any of them, and obviously your run times are going to greatly change depending on which batteries you put on the tool, and that just is true with pretty much anything. We can see as we look at the belt part of everything on the Bandfile that they have a good long working area for the belt, and that gets you into those tighter areas more, and it allows you to get into a lot more work. And surprisingly, this thing doesn't seem to struggle with the torque, all that while maintaining a pretty good center of gravity in the tool. Taking a look at the adjuster here, we can see it in the open position, and this will allow you to rotate the belt part of the tool anywhere in 360 degrees around the tool, which is really nice. It's a quick, easy lift up, and as we close it, it's very nice and compact in the lines of the tool. It's not really sticking out all that much. I mean, I'm sure it'll be in the way occasionally, but when you're cramming stuff in places, almost anything can be in the way. I think they did a good job trying to keep it in the lines of the tool and not getting outside of the normal profile. As we look at the mode selector switch, I think it's a good compromise with it. I mean, there was a lot of things they could have done, but I think this is a good way of doing things. It's one button, takes care of basically 4 functions. There's lights that indicate which of the 4 functions you have selected. They have guarding on either side of the button. The button isn't the easiest to push, but it's very, it feels very solid when you do push it. So I don't think you're going to get an accidental bumps or pushes on the button. I think it's a good way of keeping everything relatively simple, but giving options to the tool. Looking at the trigger, it's a good, decent lock system. It's akin to many air tools, so if guys are used to that, it's kind of a natural. It's kind of nice that it has the lock on feature. It's something that, if you want to put the tool on something, or or just you get tired of holding it forever, or you start doing hand acrobatics or something like that, you have some options to run the tool, and then of course just a tap of the trigger and it turns off. Here we can take a look at the nice tensioner system and everything else that holds the belt in place. It's a good system. It has what it needs. It has good spring tension. It's good and solid. Doesn't feel like you have a whole lot of lateral play in it, and it definitely seems to keep everything good and tight, which is really important with something like a belt sander. It also allows you to easily adjust the run out on the tool, which it's not as easy as the old school one we have with the knob on the side, but all of those things create compromises with the sleekness of the tool. So in order to have a nice compact tool, I think they came up with a good way of doing it with the set screw and a Phillips screw that you can manually adjust. You do need some tools to do it, but realistically it's not something that you're really going to be setting a lot, so that really shouldn't be a whole lot of a problem. You just, if you're having a belt tracking issue, you get out the Allen wrench, you adjust it, and you reset the set screw. No big deal there. Here we see the belt guard in its open position. It's really easy to open up. You have just this knurled thumb screw. You loosen that a few turns and the guard just swivels out away. Plenty of clearance in order to get the belt into there, onto the drive wheel. Nice and easy. It closes up very well. Now that we got it closed here, you can see the rubber guard on the right hand side here of the image, and that kind of helps deflect the debris that the tool's creating away from you, the user. I run the tools reverse, so I normally like chucking the dirt away, so I probably should play with it and see how effective it is when you run it forward. Here's a nice look at the top of the tool. You can see your classic 4 battery lights, nice and easy to see, not really in the way of your hand under normal operation, and realistically you're just going to want to goose the tool and see those anyway. It's a pretty nice design, nice and rounded, nothing's overly bulky. Same as the bottom here. When we take a look at that, we can see our fan ports for the motor cooling and everything. Everything's kind of integrated well. There's not a lot of extra bulk on anything. Keeps everything kind of sleek. We can see the workpiece light, which is, it does a good job. It's not sight lighting, it's just something extra to light up your workpiece, and granted, depending on how you spin the belt in the 360 degrees, it may or may not help you out. But overall, I think the idea of throwing it on there was good, and it seems to work out pretty good. So overall, does this tool deliver what they say on the package? I mean, this seems like it's not overly dramatic in what they claim or anything like that, so let's just take a look. They talk about the fastest removal for spot welds. And between the 3 that we played around with here, our old school 120 volt electric one, our adapted cutoff tool with the Harbor Freight 3/8 Bandfile on it, and this one, yes, it absolutely does have the fastest spot weld removal. You could say, well, you didn't put the 1/2 inch on the Harbor Freight. Just the amount of traction that gets and the tensioning of the Harbor Freight Bandfiles, I don't know that it would rival this tool. I mean, you could see in the videos, we laid on this thing pretty good, and it took everything and had the torque to continue removing material. So that was actually pretty impressive for a Bandfile, and the fact that it didn't instantly chuck a belt while laying on it, I was kind of surprised. The unmatched control on this, I tend to agree. The old school right angle grinder adaptation, 1 speed only. Our adaptation with the 3/8 Bandfile was also 1 speed only. So that in this regard is variable speed, and you have the 2 speed ranges as well as forward and reverse. The old school 120 did just one direction, which they would call forward, and that is one nice feature of the cutoff tool adaptation that we had. We could run it in forward and reverse also. Mobility and access. I think they did a really good job here getting this thing compact. It's a very ergonomic and balanced tool. Your hands fairly along the center line of the tool, which allows a good balance. You're not fighting the tool. That's one of the things with the old 120s. You tend to fight them as you're holding them, and they can get tiring all day. Hold the tool, continue to have pressure on the workpiece. So that's, I think they did pretty good here as far as getting a balanced and ergonomic tool. The brushless motor, yeah, that definitely, they have this stuff in pretty much everything at this point. They're 3-phase motors running on a inverter in the tool off of DC.
and I think they nailed it pretty good with this. The torque that the tool has is pretty comparable to the torque you would need for the belt sander. So as you saw, we were pushing pretty hard on it, and you don't want to really lay on belt sanders because you can overheat them and then the glue gets kind of weird, and then they go boing on you. So I think overall, I think this is a pretty good balanced tool for what you're trying to do with it. So that definitely holds up for what we're talking about here for what we observed. The claim that they could remove 50 spot welds on one battery charge, I guess maybe that's a little subjective because it depends on how big the welds are. You know, spot welds generally aren't that big. I would think you could probably do that. If they're really mounded, you may have some issues, but overall, I think you'd probably get away with that. I mean, it does seem to chew away the metal pretty good. We're not talking, you know, bead welds or even stitch welds. They're saying spot welds. So, you know, I would think even 1-inch stitch welds, you're not going to get 50 out of it, I don't think. But, you know, a quick tack spot weld type thing, you probably could smooth out 50 of them with it. I don't think that would be a hard task. So here's another brief look at the tool, and I was just kind of throw out if anybody of the viewers has any questions that we didn't go over in this video. We tried to think of a few things. We never think of everything, but is there anything that people would like to see that we didn't cover? Tried to not speed up the video of the tool working so you guys could try and get a feel of exactly what it was doing. It seems to have some torque, which is pretty impressive. It keeps the belt straight, allows you to have a good flat workpiece, and it doesn't seem to want to shred belts. We laid on it pretty good and we didn't break one belt with it, so that was pretty nice. So we will leave you here with a look at the nice classic Bandfile finish on our scrap piece of metal, and as always, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, do all those YouTube bureaucracy things and help the channel out. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.